Hello again, everybody. I'm Roger Hoover. Glad to welcome you back to the Crimson Tide Sports Network, and it's time for The Other Booth. It's presented to you by U.S. Wellness Meats. You can eat like a champion with U.S. Wellness Meats. Grass-fed and pasture-raised at U.S. Wellness Meats. Their animals eat right, so you can too. Visit them at uswellnessmeats.com. Save 15% by using the promo code BAMA. Well, we're gearing up for New Year's Day on Friday in Arlington, Texas. It'll be the Rose Bowl game between number 1 Alabama, number 4 Notre Dame, and today we're visiting with the Athletics' Pete Sampson. He covers Notre Dame for The Athletic. And Pete, it's great to talk to you. It's great to see this matchup again, Alabama and Notre Dame. A lot of people are bringing up 2012, but I know the Irish are trying to move past that as we get ready for Friday. But how's everything going?
Good. Yeah, they are. I think they're a little sick of 2012 talk. But, to be fair, that's not really going to go away until Notre Dame either wins a game like this or at least performs better in a game like this. Because it's Alabama 2012, it's Clemson in 2018, to a lesser extent, maybe Ohio State in 2015 when they've been in these major bowls against fully invested, fully rested elite opponents. They've really struggled. So this is another opportunity to sort of change the way people think about Notre Dame.
Are there some signs that you can see this season that suggest maybe this year's Notre Dame team is different than some of those you just mentioned that have had tough outings in games like this?
Yes and no, because I think that this team would be much better equipped than the 2012 team was to handle Alabama. But Alabama is not the 2012 version of itself anymore. And I think that's the big problem for Notre Dame is like just as you sort of build your lines, get old, get experience, develop better depth in your front seven and in your offensive backfield. Well, Alabama goes out and they have Devontae Smith, and a bunch of first-round picks running around at receiver, and that's a matchup for Notre Dame that is not good at all based on Notre Dame's secondary depth or a lack of it. They're a little banged up and at the back end of the defense, and that's going to be a very difficult matchup. So it's like I feel like they're better equipped to deal with Alabama of 8 years ago, but maybe not better equipped to deal with Alabama of right now.
One of the really interesting pieces on The Athletic right now is a piece that you combined with Alabama's beat writer Aaron Suttles to look at the talent gap between the Alabama roster and the Notre Dame roster. What'd you find when you guys exchanged emails back and forth and put together really a great piece?
Well, I mean, it's kind of more of a chasm than a gap. Alabama has recruited like nobody else. I believe that if you include sort of the current to-be freshman class that just signed, I mean, you're talking about 27 five-star prospects versus 1 or 2. So that's huge. Notre Dame being better at tight end that's the one spot that makes sense. That's what Notre Dame does. But I think Alabama recruiting offensive linemen just as well as Notre Dame is impressive for Alabama. And then, I don't think there were any surprises at cornerback and running back and even wide receiver about how good Alabama is. But it shows like I don't think Notre Dame is really ever going to be able to recruit at Alabama's level in terms of matching them. To me, it's much more about can you get closer? Can you have one Devonta Smith, and maybe not worry about not having a Jalen Waddle or a Jerry Jeudy or a Ruggs? Because I think right now at the skill positions, at least, Notre Dame is struggling to find just like 1 or 2 options when Alabama has 5 or 6.
And overall, when Brian Kelly addressed the media earlier in the week, what were some of his main talking points, and what's some of the storylines for Notre Dame to keep an eye on getting ready for Friday?
Aside from the big picture, big spot Notre Dame performance story, it's, Notre Dame is down to its third team center in Josh Lugg. That's a big deal because Notre Dame's offensive line is not the Joe Moore Award contending line that it was at midseason when it was fully healthy. That's a big deal. Kyle Hamilton, their star safety, number 14, third team All-American. His ankle should be better. He has to have a amazing game on Friday for Notre Dame to sort of keep up with Alabama. And then I'm fascinated to see how offensive coordinator Tommy Rees calls the game. Does he try to take the air out of the ball and play slow? Because, if you're going against a team that averages 50 points, do you really want to give them 12, 13 possessions? I think you'd like to shorten that game and then hope the defense can hold on. So pace of play for Notre Dame offensively, can they sort of play defense but on offense, if that makes sense? Those are some of the things I'm really curious to see on Friday.
And then also on The Athletic this week, you had a great story about Najee Harris of Alabama and then Notre Dame's Ian Book, and they know each other, have played before in youth football. What can you tell us about that story? We want people obviously to read it, but a few cliff notes to get them enticed to read.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it's a cool story because I mean, one, there's just sort of the happenstance that they were on the same 7-on-7 team, even though they're not really from the same hometown. Najee Harris from Antioch, sort of in the East Bay of Oakland. Ian Book is from El Dorado Hills, sort of a well-to-do suburb of Sacramento, and they played for TMP Elite together. And aside from just the hey, you're on the same team part of it, I wanted to know what did both get out of playing with the other? And for Ian Book, it's pretty obvious. You got a 3-star quarterback playing with a 5-star back. It's good for exposure, gets you sort of up to date with what it's going to be like in college. But I was kind of more interested in what does Najee get out of playing with Ian? And talking to their coaches, they said I think the perception was all right, is a skinny quarterback, is he going to work hard? Kind of affluent suburb, is this guy going to get down and grind? And I think for Najee, it was sort of a maybe a good introduction to you could, people outside your home base, they can work just as hard as you. And what it's like to sort of be led by a quarterback, which is happening at Alabama with Mac Jones. Right now for Najee Harris. And I thought it was just sort of interesting about what they both took away from each other during that time in high school.
What can you tell us about Ian Book and really the stability he seems like he's brought to the Notre Dame offense, and especially the quarterback position, because at times it has been a revolving door even during the Brian Kelly era at quarterback?
Yeah, it really has. I mean, that was sort of the knock on Kelly that I believe up until 2016, he had started multiple quarterbacks every year but one at Notre Dame. And that was sort of just what he was about. Ian Book has stabilized that position. He'll finish as the all-time winningest quarterback in Notre Dame history with 30 wins. Is probably underappreciated by the fan base because they sort of see what he's not. They see that he's not Trevor Lawrence. They see that he's not Justin Fields. He's 6 foot. He's not going to blow you away physically, but has just sort of answered the bell almost every time Notre Dame has needed it. And it is very respected in the locker room. It's sort of a quarterback who is almost wired like an offensive lineman, if that makes sense. He's not into all the Heisman stuff and publicity that comes with being the Notre Dame quarterback. So I think that sort of adds to his credibility. He's just incredibly tough. Has played through cracked ribs and a kidney contusion and just all the scrutiny that comes with being the quarterback here. So I think he's somebody that probably will be thought of more by the fan base after he's gone, which is unfortunate, but I guess that's college football. But just a really tough guy who has won a ton of games here.
As we start to wrap things up, looking at Notre Dame's 2 games this year against Clemson, obviously the dramatic win in South Bend in early November, and then the loss to Clemson in the ACC championship game. Other than Trevor Lawrence being back available for Clemson, what changed the most for the Irish in those 2 games?
The lines. Notre Dame's offensive line got worse because they lost Jarrett Patterson. We're down to that 3rd-team center, which will be the reality on Friday afternoon against Alabama too. That was big. They couldn't beat up Clemson on the defensive line anymore, and Clemson's defensive front got better. They got 2 of their best players back, James Skalski at linebacker and Tyler Davis at defensive tackle. Those were big adds for them. And then I thought that, on the other line, Notre Dame's defensive line couldn't own the point of attack against Clemson's offensive line either, which is something that, look, Alabama's offensive line is awesome. So I'm not saying that Notre Dame to dominate the trenches, but they got to be even in the trenches to have any shot at getting to Mac Jones or tackling Najee Harris or covering Devonta Smith. So both lines really need to play like they did against Clemson on November 7th for Notre Dame to have a chance. If that happens, I think we might have a good game. If it doesn't, it might look a little bit more like the ACC championship game or even the 2012 Notre Dame-Alabama game.
Well, we're looking forward to it. Friday, Alabama against Notre Dame. And Pete, as we keep getting ready for the game, once again, encourage folks to head to theathletic.com, check out the college football section, check out your work because you guys do a great job covering college football. Just thank you for your time and your insights today on Notre Dame. All the best.
Anytime. Thanks for having me.
All right, that was Pete Sampson of The Athletic. Thank you for watching the Crimson Tide Sports Network.